Welcome to the Grief and Belief podcast, where we share stories of hope. Thank you for joining us. We hope this powerful story will help you feel God's love for you today.
Welcome to another episode of the Grief and Belief podcast. I'm David Mickelson.
And I'm Jordan Robertson.
And we're so excited to have you on as a co-host, Jordan.
Yeah, this is exciting for me. I'm always in the hot seat, so this feels nice.
Yeah, you've been such a wonderful addition to the team. And with Corey still needing prayers for his back, I thought, I'm going to ask Jordan to be my buddy today and help me interview. And I'm so grateful that you're willing and able to do it.
Yeah, I feel lucky to get to know Bryan and hear his story.
Yeah. I wanted to maybe just share something really quickly before we introduce Bryan. Father's Day, by the time this comes out, Father's Day was probably a couple of Sundays ago. And, I've mentioned before, my dad passed away last July. And I thought, how can I connect with Dad on Father's Day? And decided to go back through our text messages. And Dad and I didn't text a lot in the last couple of years of his life because he had dementia. He wasn't good on a phone. And so I just scrolled back as far as I could go, and there weren't a ton, but it was really heartwarming to go back and see the nature of our relationship. Dad was always really warm and kind and thoughtful, and he would always say really nice things. I'm so glad you're my son, and all these different things. And so I just had a nice experience before church, laying in my bed, thinking about Dad. And then I remembered those text messages become kind of an important part of a record of a person's life or of a document of our relationship. And I remember when Ava passed away, her phone was this really sacred thing. We were still getting some messages on her phone that we liked to read, but then also I wanted to pull everything I could off of it. And it was really easy to get photos. It's really easy to get other things, but what wasn't easy was to get all of her text messages off of her phone. And so it took me a year and a half of research to find someone who knew how to do it. And it was kind of a miracle how it all happened. But regardless, if our listeners are the kind of people that are holding on to a cell phone because it still has old text messages on there, I'm going to put in our podcast notes a link to a website, a program that you can use to pull it off. It costs about $20 for a license, but you can go into any phone, Apple, Android, and pull all these old text messages off, pull them off as PDFs, and then store them safely. So when that cell phone eventually dies, you can feel like you got everything on there. So I'll put that in the episode notes. If you're watching on YouTube, go to Spotify or Apple Music, and it'll be there. Okay, well, let's introduce our guest. Bryan Wilson is becoming a friend of mine. We've had a chance to connect a few times, and Bryan reached out to me through social media, and it took a little while for me to connect with him because of some social media things. But finally, we made it happen not too long ago. And so Bryan's on today to introduce us to his son, Brooks, who passed away when he was just a youngster. And Bryan, thank you so much for joining us on the podcast today.
David, thank you for letting me be here. It's a pleasure to be with both you and Jordan today. And I'm really excited to share my story. I hope anybody listening today, they can learn something from me and walk away with an added measure of love of what the Savior can do in our lives.
Yeah. I'm confident that will happen just after talking with you a little bit and you sharing your story. And so you've got wonderful things to share. So why don't we start by you telling us about you, Bryan, where you're from, what you love to do, anything like that.
Cool. Yeah, I grew up in Payson. If I would go back in my family history far enough, 3 of the original settlers of Payson are my direct ancestors. So we kind of hang out in the area, and we've just kind of stuck here. That was where some of the inspiration for Brooks's middle name came from. So my grandfather's name was Thomas, and then my 3rd great grandfather on the Wilson side, his name was Thomas Henry Wilson, and he made the journey from England here to Payson and helped establish the town of Payson. So it just felt really right for that to be his middle name. Kristen, my wife, we met in 2014, and we started dating for a while, and by June of 2015, we got married in the Payson Temple. We're coming up on our wedding anniversary here this week, and we've had 4 kids. Not long after we were married, we purchased a home. I think it was less than a month. We had put an offer in on a home. It was kind of rapid for us, but we were married a little bit older, and we felt like that was a good time for us to jump in, and we're grateful that we did, and we have absolutely loved the neighborhood that we've lived in. So my 4 children, Hudson is my oldest. Brooks would be my second child, and he passed away on August 22nd, 2024. And then Dawson is my little 4-year-old, and Oakley's my little 2-year-old. We love to be outdoors, camping, recreation, riding dirt bikes. I start my kids out on electric powered motorcycles at about 3 years old, and they learn to love the outdoors and spend time riding motorcycles with dad and mom. So
that seems like a big part of your family culture is being on motorcycles or dirt bikes or 4-wheelers and being outside.
I'm thinking my one son, Thomas, would love to be in your family and ride on electric vehicles.
He can come over anytime. We honestly got plenty of them, and yeah, we love sharing it with friends and neighbors. So,
well, tell us about Brooks. He's this cute. He's got the kind of a mischievous smile in the picture that we're showing on YouTube, and his arms are folded like he's going to church. Yeah, tell us about Brooks.
I think that pretty well sums him up. He was quite mischievous and always wanting to explore and learn. I can't even tell you how many times we had this little bug catcher, and he would fill it full of bugs, fill it full of grasshoppers, fill it full of whatever. I remember him sneaking over to our neighbors a few times, and they had some kittens. They had a litter of kittens, and he was trying to take one home, and we're like, absolutely not, dude. Like, that's not what we're into. Absolutely loved dinosaurs, and he knew more names of dinosaurs than I'll probably ever know. One of the things that's stuck out is his favorite color has been green, so that's been something that we always look for. One thing that's been really significant to me that I've kind of watched with him is he had mannerisms and characteristics that were so much bigger than he was. The character of him being a friend to just anybody and everybody, and it didn't care if he didn't know it was his first time meeting you or he'd been your long friend. He was so good at just being kind to everybody and making sure people were included. And if you were there, you were his best friend, and he wanted to do whatever you wanted to do. That was one of my favorite things. One of my favorite stories of him, and we kind of got after him. So my wife teaches preschool here in the home, and he was going to mom's preschool the one day, and it was show and tell. He managed to sneak his Book of Mormon into his backpack and decided, we're going to talk about the Book of Mormon in preschool. And both my wife and I said, that's probably not the right place to do that. And I remember she had to steer that conversation a bit, but that was just who he was. He loved the scriptures, and he loved his prayers were just remarkable to listen to him pray and to be such a good big brother. The other thing that I really, really admire about Brooks was he was a great brother, and he just wanted to help people. I'd go out in the garage and I would work. Didn't matter what I was working on. He probably did it the wrong way, but he wanted to be there and he wanted to help me, and he was right there by my side. And that was hard to go with that when he first passed. But I can get into more of that there later, but I think that gives you an idea of who he was. And anytime I jumped on a motorcycle, he wanted to follow right behind me. So,
Bryan, I remember you saying when Brooks was really young, maybe when he was born, that you kind of had an impression that your time with him might be short. Would you mind kind of walking through what that was like?
Absolutely. So when he was born in the hospital there in Provo, he had some complications that were kind of surprising to Kristen and I. None of our kids ever spent any time in the NICU. They always grunted a little bit when they were first born, and they were kind of noisy babies, so we didn't really think much of it. We finished the labor and delivery process, and we headed down to our room, and it was early in the morning, probably 1, 2 in the morning. So Kristen and I are already beyond tired, and I just remember we went in to do some secondary evaluations, and they said they wanted to move him to another location, and they were going to put a CPAP on him. And he ended up staying there for 3 days, and that was really hard for me. And just over an extended amount of time, Kristen and I both had the impression, but we never ever said to each other that our timeline with him was probably going to be a little bit different. It was probably going to be a little bit shorter. We never mentioned that or anything to each other. We just always felt that impression, I don't know why, that our time with him was going to be different, but it was still going to be awesome, and we were going to enjoy it as best we could. But I still remember Kristen and I talking about that later, and both her and I having the exact same impression, and we never mentioned anything about it. So.
Well, it seems like from what you've explained about your family and Brooke's childhood that you made the most of the time that you had together, and lots of warm and fun memories. And maybe this is a time to transition to the part that we don't like to transition to, but it's part of the story and part of the experience. And can you talk to us a little bit about Brooks and his passing?
Absolutely. I'm going to roll back about a month before, because I think it's pretty important information. But the month before, I was in a calling in the stake, and I got asked to have an interview with one of the stake presidency members, which was pretty routine at the time. I was on the high council, and during the interview process, I was asked to be released, and I remember being devastated. And he issued a new calling to me at the same time, and he asked if I would be in the bishopric in my ward. And I was kind of taken aback, but I said, absolutely, let's do this. So that was about a month before he passed. And the Monday before he passed, I remember as part of that assignment, we went over to a neighbor's house, and this neighbor had their boyfriend commit suicide. And I remember going over and trying to comfort the family and just try and be there. And that was a pretty difficult situation. There was a lot of sad faces, a lot of tears. And I remember coming home to my wife that night and just explaining to her, I don't know if I'll make it if I had one of my children die. If I had something like this happen, I don't know that I'll be okay. And little did I know 4 days later that was going to be a reality for me. So the day of his passing, I had taken the day off of work just out of the blue. I figured it was a good day to go motorcycle riding, so I planned to ride with my dad. And we went up Payson Canyon, had an amazing ride, and we took lunch and came home, and my boys had just got with me. So Hudson was back in school at the time, and my younger 2 boys told me, let's go for a motorcycle ride, Dad. Let's just go around the neighborhood for a minute, and then we'll go down for a nap. And that ended up being the last ride that I took with him. But I remember that day so vividly, and it was different. First and foremost, I want to talk about gun safety, because it does involve a handgun. And whatever you're doing, I would challenge anybody listening today to do the very best that you can to make sure that those guns are safe and secure. And I challenge you to look at whatever methods that you're using to reevaluate those and do better. I figured that this handgun was in a safe location. It wasn't somewhere that was immediately obvious, and it was secured in my eyes, and that did not end up being the case. As everybody was settling down for a nap, my wife was putting kids down, I received a prompting to leave the living room that I was sitting in and kind of attending to Brooks, and I walked in the other room and grabbed my water bottle, and I heard a loud pop, and my wife had balloons set up for my son's birthday. So my wife and Hudson both share the same birthday, and it was their weekend to kind of celebrate. And I figured, it was just a balloon that had popped. And I found Brooks, and I knew that he needed help. I was the very first to arrive, and I yelled for my wife, and I said, I need your phone, I need whatever. And I immediately started CPR. I started dispatch, and I remember my mind being absolutely clear, which was not too far off because I had ran as an EMT for a while and I was familiar with some trauma stuff. But when it's your own family member, that can obviously be a little bit different. But I knew exactly what he needed. I told my wife, hey, I need you to control the bleeding here, and I'm going to start CPR. And we did, and it didn't seem like very long, and we had ambulance support there. And I remember being told at that time, I was prompted that one of two things would happen: that my son would live and I would get to enjoy that experience with him, with whatever that time looked like, or that I would learn to live on without him. And sadly, the second one came true, and it broke my family. I remember being pulled in the other room with law enforcement officers and providing statements. EMS was very professional in their mannerisms and told us everything, and it wasn't very long before they said they weren't able to establish a rhythm or anything along those lines. But while I was there, when I did CPR, I was able to get one last breath out of him and communicate how much we loved him. So Kristen and I both had that opportunity. Even though it was really challenging, we did have that. And I just remember after that, it was chaos. Our home was chaos, and I lost it. I'm sure it was hours on hours of me just not being okay. And my brother lives next door. He opened up his home and let us go down there for a while. I remember newscasters. I remember all sorts of people being there, and I remembered my oldest was still at school, and I needed to go get him. And I remember being on the porch, we were on the front lawn, excuse me, and I had to tell him. I knelt down on one knee and I explained what happened, and I walked through that with him and what that was all about. And I just remember there was so many unknowns that Kristen and I had. Are we going to stay in our home? Are we not? What's our marriage going to look like? What's our family going to look like? We just immediately hit that wall of, oh crap, our whole life is upside down. What are we going to do? Well, Hudson and Brooks were sharing rooms. What's that going to look like? And in the midst of all that chaos, we decided to stay a few nights away from our home just to kind of collect our thoughts and figure out what we wanted to do from there. And the first night was in her parents' home just here in Santaquin, and I remember we were still bawling our eyes out and trying to make sense of everything. But I laid down that night. It took us a long time to go to sleep, but I remember feeling peace. And that was so out of the ordinary for me. It was just, I'm in utter chaos, but it's going to be okay. It's going to be all right. And having those two so tangible in there, it was really hard for me, but I just said, okay, well, let's follow that and see where it goes. Let's see, I think that pretty well hits on most of his passing. Do you guys have any other questions or anything there?
I mean, I've spent a lot of time studying grief, and it's one thing to have the grief experience of just losing someone you love, but what you're describing is such a layered process, Bryan, of like, this was complicated by many factors. So it's not just my little boy died. There's a million other things at play that I'm feeling and processing like within a moment.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And to add to that complication, Jordan, it wasn't very long that media grabbed a hold of our story, and it seemed like it was all over. And as I mentioned to you before, it was just so off topic or out of our ordinary to be in front of people and want to be in the spotlight. In fact, I remember a police officer asking us if we were comfortable talking to the media, and I said, no, I want you to run point on it. I don't want to say anything right now. I'm sure if I do, I'll probably say the wrong thing, and I want nothing to do with it. But I remember some of the things that were said as they ran with that story about how unfit to be a father I was, and how I was responsible. And I've worked through that a lot. I've felt 100% responsible because it was on me. And that has been really hard for me, that I don't deserve my kids, that I don't, and to read those things and to eventually counsel with my bishop in bishopric meeting and talk to him about that. And just, he told me to just stay away from it. And that helped a lot, but there was definitely a lot of negativity towards that.
Can you talk a little bit about being in the bishopric when this happened? I'm imagining the challenge. Some of the complication is I'm a leader in a religious organization and I'm sitting on the stand where I don't blend in with everybody else. Everybody's eyes are on me, and it might have been a few weeks before you went back to church, but can you talk a little bit about maybe some of the complicated nature of your calling at the time?
Absolutely. So I had been put in the bishopric, and my dad had just been called as a new bishop in his ward in Payson. And both him and I decided to take that Sunday off and not go to church. And we had church in our home, and it was a small, intimate sacrament meeting that week, and that was what I needed that week. And the next week, I decided to go to church. And I spent a lot of time not feeling like I should be on the stand, that I didn't deserve to be there. And I struggled with that for a long time. And it was hard to be up on the stand and try and control my emotions and be okay, even though I was hurting inside. I think one of the things was I needed that calling, and I knew that. And it was an opportunity for me to serve. And my Sundays were really busy. My Tuesdays and Wednesdays, they were busy. And I think if it wouldn't have been that way, me having meetings and me being so engaged, I think it would have been a lot different for me. And I don't know if I would be here with you today because of how dark things got for me for a while. That took a long time to work through. But between that responsibility and being with my wife and working through, she'd never been exposed to trauma on that level. I had been exposed to a fair bit. And between counseling and her and I just talking through absolutely everything over and over and over, it finally got to the point where it started hurting a little bit less. And that took a really long time. As you know, that grief journey, it does take a really, really long time. And I'm sure it's a lifelong pursuit. But it's been amazing to work through that part of the aspect and use my wife and so many great people that were there to help us through this.
I think it's very brave of you, Bryan, to share like your feelings of guilt. And I think there's other parents probably in the future now who will listen to this and think, there's aspects of my child's death that I caused, whether that's from a drowning where they weren't paying attention, or a driveway where they backed out and didn't see a little child. Like I'm thinking if these are death experiences I've heard of, and I think there's a layer to that of like, I'm responsible. What would you say to parents who may feel that
it's going to be okay? And it takes a long time to find the confidence in yourself. I remember one thing that keeps coming to my mind is how hard it was for me. I was walking Hudson to and from school, or his school he goes to is only a couple blocks from here, and I was walking to and from with him every day, but there's an open field that we go through, and that's where Brooks to learn to ride his motorcycle. And I'd take him over and I'd walk back, and I could not walk across that field without my eyes absolutely filling with tears. And coming home and just falling on my knees and just pleading for the Lord to just take it and just help me work through it. because I couldn't deal with it anymore. And I did that over and over and over and over and over the whole school year, and it took a really, really long time, Jordan. And I think the important thing for people to know is it does take a long time, but God works on us. And as we apply his atonement, it can be absolutely magnificent. The next thing I want to kind of tie into this is the importance of the temple, and that helped give me or shape a lot of my perspective. The next day, or that next morning after we woke up and he had passed, I needed to feel something because I was feeling broken. Like I needed to feel some sort of perspective, like everything was just on pause, and I didn't know where things were going, and I just needed some confidence in what I was doing, why I was here, you know, those big questions that we ask when something major happens. And I remember my daughter had a wellness checkup because she was only a few months old. We went to that, and we stopped in the Payson Temple parking lot, and we just sat there. And I just cried and cried and cried, and I said, we need to come back. I remember seeing a whole bunch of people just sitting out front, and they were dressed in their Sunday clothes, and they were all cheering. And I just thought, you know, that's probably what my son's enjoying right now, but I'm not feeling it. You know, I'm not feeling that at all. I'm feeling the opposite. So we took our daughter back over to my parents' house, and I kind of brought that up to my parents, and they said, why don't you guys just go see what you can make happen? We're not doing anything today, just go. So we went to the temple, and we ended up talking to somebody in the temple presidency, and they gave us special permission to go and sit in the celestial room. And I felt that it was going to be okay. Still cried a lot, but I had a sense of feeling that it was all going to be okay, and that it was going to work out, and he was okay. And that was what I needed at the time. I just needed he's okay. Things are good. Yeah, that was really difficult, but I just remember regularly going to the temple after that and making that a priority.
I think sometimes it's easier, maybe not easier to think that our loved one's going to be okay, but that we're not. Like heaven, the spirit world, it's a peaceful place. Jesus has them, but I'm left here in this wicked world that's sometimes dark, and I'm suffering, and they can see me, but I can't see them. And so maybe talk, Bryan, about how the temple became, maybe as you continue to go to the temple, how did it become a place where like heaven and earth could meet together for an hour or two?
For sure. So my wife and I had already made a point before this that we were trying to go once or twice ourselves in the month, and then together. And I think that helped kind of already set the precedence for us that we needed to keep going. And as we did, I just kept pulling family name after family name after family name and taking it to the temple with me, because it gave me some purpose. And I loved going to the temple. Every time I went, I'd leave and I'd go, all right, we're recharged. We can do this for another week. And usually cry on the way over, cry on the way back, cry somewhere in between. That was kind of the normal. And I just let myself feel a lot of emotions. Like that was huge for me. Before, I just was kind of like standard emotions, just we're going to go with the flow, everything's good. And this was the extremes. This was really happy, really sad, everything in between, feelings of pain that I'd never felt before, and this was all new to me. But I remember just saying, let's just keep going, and it's going to get better, and it did. Now, just regularly going to the temple was powerful for me, and it helped me better understand the work that we do in the temple. It's for ancestors, it's for our loved ones. And I remember having that thought initially of, well, I'm excited, I can do Brooks's temple work someday. And I remember looking into that further and going, no, there's nothing for me to do for right now. It's done. Like everything that needs to be done for him, he's sealed to us, and that's all the temple work we do until later on down the road. So that was a learning for me, and I got to see that from a different light. That was really cool.
Was there a particular truth, principle, doctrine, or ordinance that stands out from your temple experience that was helpful? I think you kind of referenced, like, we're doing work for our ancestors, which is evidence that we believe there is life after death. This work doesn't matter unless we believe that. But was there anything else that seemed to give you hope, or maybe things you were learning as you went to the temple?
Honestly, my favorite ordinance was doing sealings with my wife. It helped us reaffirm that temple marriage and what the purpose behind the temple marriage is, and everything, those blessings that we stand to inherit, the covenants and promises that we made in the temple, those were so much more impactful, and they meant so much more to me, because it was me now looking to the future of the what could be's. Here's what we lack still, and what we get to experience if we just hold on a little bit longer. You know, it's going to be however long it's going to be until we see him again. But I'm holding on to, this is the promise we made, and it will be made sure as long as I turn to the Savior, and we keep holding up our end of the deal.
And I love what you said about that you just go every 7 days, you know, that it was not, because I think grief sometimes feels like I have to do this forever. Brooks died when he was 5. I have to now live for 80 more years. But it's like, no, if you just live those 6 days, those 7 days, right? Get what you need, be refilled, you can do 6 more. And I think you're sharing about that reality.
Agreed. I think to add on to that, it's amazing how neat it was to start bringing some of that home to our kids, and to talk to our kids about the promise that we made, and our gospel study in the home definitely changed. We started to be more intentional. It was amazing how quick that started happening, that we started to be serious about trying to make it through the Book of Mormon. And I remember us struggling, and we still struggle through reading the Book of Mormon with our kids, but getting them started on that, and them starting to see their testimony shape and form, especially my oldest as he's learning to read. It's been awesome to watch him learn to read from the Book of Mormon, and to develop his own testimony and start to realize, okay, this is where Brooks is. This is what's going on. And talking with our kids regularly about Brooks's passing, just about him in general, and looking for signs of him, signs that talk all about him and would point us to him, that he's still right here with us. That's been really powerful and impactful for us.
Bryan, you wanted to talk a little bit about angels. Wondering, what perspective you would like to share about the importance of angels.
So I mentioned to David previously that before Brooks had passed, I had been praying to understand the gift of ministering angels and what that was about. I read about it in the scriptures. We read about it in Doctrine and Covenants, that we can pray for it. It's part of the Aaronic priesthood that's bestowed and blessed upon us. And as I read through that, I said, well, I want to start praying for what that is and what that's about and how it works. I know, because of the clarity I had on the day of his passing, there were angels there. I have zero doubt in my mind that there were angels there. They were ready, and they were ready to swoop him up and make sure that he was comforted and he was okay as he passed. And I also know they were bearing myself up and my family, my extended loved ones, and we felt that for a really long time, and we continue to pray for that. I can say now more than ever that I really do understand the gift of ministering angels. As we have gone to the temple, I can't even describe how close they are and how wonderful it is to know that they are there and they have our best interest at heart. They're really concerned about what we are doing right here, and I know that to be true. And I know that they're pressuring us to make the right decisions, to help the right people, and I think that's the perspective that my wife and I are trying to take in our own lives. As people need help, we step up and we do it, and we want to help and be there for people just as they've been for us.
And even as we were talking before we recorded, you just said you felt very prompted from your son to share about his experience.
Absolutely.
I'm kind of thinking that maybe some of those angels there that were there to receive Brooks were some of the ancestors whose names were maybe Thomas, after his middle name. I imagine there's a connection there. We often talk about, well, the other thing I might mention quickly is I would say my belief in the ministering of angels has dramatically increased, but my ability to feel them doing something has not increased, right? Like, I don't feel Ava close to me all of the time. And I think some people do have that gift. You've kind of mentioned that you felt him urging you on, you felt things in the temple. And I know not everyone feels that way, but I think there's a power in the belief that it could be happening, that they are around, even if I don't feel it. It gives me comfort to know that it's likely happening. And I got to continue working on, seeing with spiritual eyes or feeling more of those spiritual things. But I'm also wondering about kind of earthly ministering angels. Do you have some experience that comes to mind as you think about how your family or your community ministered to you in the wake of Brooks's passing?
Yeah, I'm gonna struggle with this one, because this is where all the good has come, and that's what my wife and I knew immediately was going to happen. Was one of the two: we were going to see the good or we were going to see the bad from this. So as I mentioned, after he passed, we hadn't spent a few nights in our home, and it had been a while until we came. And as we were driving up to our home, we turned up Center Street to get there. And I just remember seeing green ribbons tied all the way up. And I'm like, what's this all about? And we get to our house, and there were green ribbons all over our house. There were wreaths, there were flowers. And our ward literally took us under their wing. We had family, we had friends, we had neighbors, we had people that we didn't even know that reached out to us and expressed condolences and were just there for us. We had people anonymously just dropping off food and whatever to our home. But our ward was beyond amazing. So for me to sit on the stand, yes, it was difficult, but they were helping me, and I was doing my best to try and help them. I think it was an overabundance of good. Even though there was that bad, I think there was so much good from just everybody. And I know we were nervous when we first stepped into our home, but it felt like home again. And our family did everything to make accommodations to check on us. One thing that we had started before all this shook out with my family was family home evening. We started doing that with my side of the family, my extended side of the family. And I didn't realize how important that was and how much we needed that. And we've always had a group text, and we would just text each other all the time with whatever good things were going on in their life. And there was a lot that we were working through Brooks passing, but I remember so many scriptures and just so much more discussion going on there. And we still continue that family home evening with my extended family to this day, because it's been so impactful for us. I think we started it when Hudson was little, but it's been a tradition that's meant so much to my wife and I, and to my side of the family. It's been a real blessing, because we've just been able to step in and help and be there for each other.
I think the community, like the people who said the not very nice things about you, Bryan, are people who don't know you, right? They didn't know who you were. They knew a news story. The beauty of a family and a ward family is that they know who you are. And so those thoughts don't cross minds. They just want to come to the rescue and come to support and love and cry with you. And I can't imagine trying to go through a grief experience, a loss experience without the support of family. And I know people have to do it, and it just breaks my heart to think of what it might be like without having, we had the ribbon experience ourselves. I still remember the lady still putting them up as we were driving into our neighborhood and just crying, and we'll love her forever, and the other sisters who did it. And so I think the value of community and the blessing, especially being a member of the church or a member of any organization, it can be a work family, it can be just a neighborhood, a community, whoever it might be. People really show that there's a lot of good in the world because they show up for things like this. And it's a testament to the good people that there are in this world.
It was amazing. Yeah.
Bryan, before we get to our last question, is there anything else that you want to make sure you share on today's episode?
Yeah, I think I'll talk a little bit about just his funeral service and what that was like for me. There's just a few things that I don't think parents are ever prepared for. Being a parent and getting married is a few of those things. And one I don't think any parent should have to go through is burying their child. And that funeral and trying to put together an obituary and everything about that was just such a foreign concept to me. And I remember people just stepping in and saying, well, we're going to do this display and we're going to do, and they literally took 90% of the load off of us. And I remember us going there that night for his viewing. And I walked down the hall and it was him. They had taken every memory of him and they had slammed it in the hallway of the church, and it was absolutely magnificent. I couldn't have thrown anything together better if I would have tried. But I walked in there that day and it was him. And I remember I decided I wanted to speak at his funeral. I didn't know what that was going to look like, and I definitely wasn't prepared for it. But I woke up about 2 nights before I was going to speak, early in the morning, about 4 o'clock in the morning, and all these thoughts just started flowing. And I'm like, I got to write this down. So I went and grabbed a tablet and I just got to work. And I had 90% of his talk written down right there. And I remember why we were at the chapel, and I don't know that the chapel had been so full, and other than a stake conference meeting, it was packed to the brim of people there to support us. And I remember the stake president was there, and he asked everybody that was there to stand. And he mentioned that every single one of these people was there for me and my family, and they're not going anywhere. And that meant a lot to me. Like you said, David, there are so many people in your community that are there, and they are willing to serve, and they don't ask a whole lot of questions. They just get to work. And that's what I experienced, and it was absolutely amazing to watch.
Oh, that's beautiful, Bryan. Thank you for being willing to share that and for just sharing Brooks with us. What a beautiful guy. And we're grateful to get to know him a little bit and to get to know you. Now we'll go to our last question that we like to ask everybody. Bryan, considering your experience with grief, what do you now believe about Jesus Christ?
I've learned to grow a lot closer to him through this experience. It's been the most painful, traumatizing, and difficult situation I've ever been in my life. And I can't tell you how many times I've fallen on my knees again and again and again and asked for relief, and I've asked for help. And I found a friend there every single time. I think before this, I took for granted what the atonement of Jesus Christ is really about. And it's not just about our sins or our imperfections. It's about our pain, it's about our suffering, and it's about Him coming to the rescue every single time. And that relationship for me, it has changed my perspective of what the Savior can do. Before this, I put limitations on the Savior Jesus Christ and His effects to heal me and to heal my family and to help us grow closer to Him. I had put a lot of restrictions on the atonement of Jesus Christ and kind of put it in a box and said, it can do this, but it can't help me with this. And I have found that it does so much more than what meets the eye. It has been a life-changing experience. And as I said before, He was there for me. There were times that it took me a minute to recognize it and to understand that He was there and the way that He was working on me, but every single time He showed up for me and He led me a little bit closer to Him. And as I placed my burden upon Him and remembered what that suffering was all about, it gave purpose to the atonement of Jesus Christ. And I look forward to that glorious resurrection that all of us get to be with our loved ones again someday. And it's helped shape that perspective for me, I think, better than it has any other way, or I could have learned it any other way.
That's such a powerful testimony, Bryan, and I think so encouraging to anyone grieving, whatever their context, right? Like however you entered into this grief land, that Jesus is there and He'll be with you. I hear that so powerfully, and I see that in the way He's been there for you. Thank you for sharing.
Well, thank you, Bryan, for being a wonderful guest. You've brought a lot of hope and perspective and thoughtfulness to our episode today. And so we just want to thank you for being willing to be interviewed on the Grief and Belief podcast.
You're welcome. Thank you for my time. Yeah, thanks for letting me be here.
Thank you to our incredible guests for sharing their story of hope. If you know someone who might be blessed by hearing this message, please share it with them. We would love it if you would subscribe, rate, and review, and comment on our podcast so others can find it. Be sure to follow us on Instagram and Facebook, as well as join our Grief and Belief Facebook group. Thank you to our sponsor, High Five Live Tours, where fun and joy meet on inspiring travel experiences. Special thanks to our producer, Misty Lynn Howard. Check out her history podcast called Faith Ignited. Thank you again for listening, and we'll see you next time.